Hey, it's Coach Taylor from SmarterTeamTraining.com. I'm always telling people on the show here, use social media to connect with people in our field. They might be different than you. They might have a different philosophy. They might be doing even something a little bit different in our field as far as their profession of choice. I even got a guy on the phone right now that we connected via Twitter, and he happened to be on the West Coast, the left coast of America, and he got a chance to fly into the East Coast and do some work here. Just actually fairly close to where I live here in Baltimore. It just so happened that fate would have it kind of thing. I had an opportunity to go down and meet with him, shake his hand, learn a little bit about him, and just a dialogue going back and forth through emails and actually getting the chance to see his passion firsthand. It was a no-brainer to get him on the show. So, Bryan, man, I'm honored. I'm to have you on the show. It was an outstanding opportunity to get a chance to meet you the other day and just learn a little bit about you. You're going from Twitter and see what people do in 140 characters to actually getting a chance to shake their hand and have them open up their experiences or their knowledge to you. It was greatly appreciated on my end, my man.
Thanks a lot, Rob, for having me on the show. It was definitely great meeting you in person after these couple of years of just communicating, like you said, on social media, mostly on Twitter, but at the same time, following your background within the coaching profession and then being in the private sector and just how much you contribute to the profession with, your website, but as well as, the clinics that you have put on. And that's pretty much how I've recognized your name and, the STT name. I get these emails about these clinics. I'm like, oh my God, he's got all these speakers. Like, where is this place at? And I'm like, oh my God, it's on the other side of the country, and now we're like literally an hour away from each other. So extremely fortunate for that, extremely excited for, all possibilities and networking with you and anyone else you're associated with.
Bryan, we're going to post your bio and those types of things and your accomplishments, which are all outstanding, on the show here in the description. So I don't need necessarily go over the day-to-day or the year-by-year version of what you've done in the field. But I want to know a question that a lot of people don't get asked, and they probably don't ask enough. But it's based around the word passion. I mean, where did you become motivated and passionate about this field? And then do me a little bit of a favor. Tell me a little bit about what you have going on now, my man.
Passion, pretty easy. I come from a family of coaches. My father is a retired football coach. Different aunts, uncles, cousins within the coaching profession. And my one uncle still works for the Detroit Tigers. So as we say, we don't really have family reunions. We have coaching clinics. So my passion for coaching stems from a very early age, as well as developing very thick skin to go into the coaching profession. But, I was that typical undersized high school athlete. I played 5 sports, so I was a good athlete, but not great. I was 160-pound defensive back going into college, and because of being exposed to some good training and being exposed to some bad training, I finished my playing career at 205 pounds, and my reputation became not just that I was a hard worker or a good football player, but that, being committed to the process, being committed to your training, being committed to the lifestyle that's required to make that progress. That was my reputation. So anytime you get positive feedback from people, you always feel good about that. So that was, my passion as a player when I was in college. One of the strength coaches that I played for, Scott Keller, he's an older coach. He's been around, played in the NFL for a little bit. He's really the coach that inspired me into this profession because he, was relentless with training, from my freshman and sophomore year. But on top of that, I remember this distinct conversation where I was asking him, to do what you're doing in this profession, what classes did you have to take? What was your degree in? And he starts going into all these exercise physiology classes and all the chemistry classes and all these other classes. And I'm like, there's no way I want to do that. No way I'm going to do that. So what do? I get my undergrad was in marketing, and then the passion really settled in, my senior year of college. That's when the light bulb went on. So I kind of had to reinvent myself and my education, and that's really the background of my passion of getting into this profession.
Getting a chance to see a coach and learning a little bit about the environment that I get a chance to experience there for a short period of time. I'm not a well-versed Olympic lifting coach. I'll be very up and front and honest with people, as transparent as I can be. I've said it many times on the show. I'm always interested in seeing how different people conduct strength conditioning programs, teach exercises, how they coach reps. I mean, when you're working with a large group and you're talking about Olympic lifting, I mean, talk me through this concept of how you really try to coordinate and establish an environment that there's an expectation for high skill execution within very complex lifts.
Great question, because I think weightlifting, with cleans and snatches, everyone loves to say that they're doing them, and they say that they're doing well, and they throw out all these large numbers that they're using, and handling, but they're missing the point of the exercises. And to me, in my evolution as a coach, that has come 360 degrees. I used to look at cleans and snatches and power development being just that. It's just for power development. It's just for performance based. It's just for getting faster. And the more I look at it, to me, cleans and snatches are probably the best, modalities for injury prevention, because they teach you to apply force, they teach you to absorb force, and they teach you the difference of when you have to do it and how fast you have to do it. So to me, that's exactly what you have to do, when you're playing a sport, especially, like football. So to me, that's the way I view the exercises. And so anything with injury prevention, I think, has to be taught very meticulously. And you have to be very anally obsessed with how you teach it. So that's kind of my foresight on how I visualize these exercises and their purpose within a training program. My background was I was privileged to learn from people who were either on the national weightlifting team or the Olympic weightlifting team or Olympic level coaches. And the three big ones, or four big ones I should say, were Mark Lavelle, Jeff Macy, Al Vermeil, and Roger Nielsen. So I got exposed to some very high caliber coaches. But again, those guys are usually coaching just a couple of people at a time. So how do you do it in a group setting, like you brought up in the question? And that was kind of our reputation at Oregon State, was you have this big group of people, and yet you go down the row and you watch people, and their technical proficiency is really, really good. Is it 100%? No, you never get 100%. But overall, the quality, the proficiency, the player's understanding of the movements and the execution, the timing required for it, they have it. So how do we go about doing that? Number one is, if that's your bread and butter, make it your bread and butter, and make it the importance of your entire training program. And that's what we did. So do we just start with doing cleans and snatches? No, absolutely not. We really strip the exercise away, and we work on, what is basic mobility that they need to have to do these exercises? What is some of the basic strengths they need to have to be able to do these exercises? What's the basic work capacity that you need to be able to have to go through these motions? Once you've established those three things, which is like your block 0 or block 1 with any training program, then you can start implementing exercises that carry over into improving or starting with cleans and snatches. So you have to be able to overhead squat. You got to be able to front squat. You got to be able to deadlift or do your clean deadlift variations. You got to be able to do RDLs. You got to be able to do bent over rows. You got to be able to do your overhead presses. So you take all those basic strength exercises. So you not only are you developing strengths in a performance measurement for your sport, but also those exercises, when you become proficient at them, make learning cleans and snatches very easy. Then you break down your cleans and snatches into, I usually like to do from the top down, where you teach the how you should stand, just stand with the bar for a clean. How you should rack a bar at the very end with a clean. What does that look like? Get them exposed to that. Some people can't rack a bar for a clean or rack a bar for a snatch. Get them exposed under time, under tension with those exercises. And then the other, a big component is take the time to teach the exercise. Take the time to teach why each component has to be done, sequentially throughout the exercise. Like I said, a lot of people want to be able to say, yep, we do our cleans, yep, we do our snatches. But when they get athletes who struggle with learning the exercise, what do you do? To me, that's the difference between teaching and coaching, and they're two different things. Teaching, it should take anywhere from 6 months, maybe to a year, with cleans and snatches before I would feel comfortable coaching someone on those exercises where they're actually really trying to improve the load that they're able to handle and really trying to improve the carryover from what you're doing with it in the weight room and how it's going to help you prepare for impact and perform on the field. So have a training thought process laid out and make sure that it's a marathon, not a sprint, to teach these exercises. Everyone is going to learn at a different rate. Okay, you got to know that ahead of time. Just based on the way their bodies are structured, it's going to be different. So the basic way to eliminate all that is teach extremely basic movements and teach them actually very slow. Like if you want to teach like a hang clean, teach them to just hold the position in that bar above knee and hold that position right there, and don't do anything else. Then you teach them how to shift their knees through and shift the balance of their weight to where the bar is a little bit higher on their thigh. You just hold that position. Then teach them just to extend their hips and hold that position. So really break down the movement itself. One of the things that I think has helped us a lot was, cleans and snatches. We would force young people to keep their feet flat the entire time doing cleans and doing snatches. And what that does is it helps them learn the timing of when that bar gets super high up on your thigh at the very last moment. That's when you start getting up on your toes and really starting to accelerate the bar. A lot of times people want to get on their toes too soon. And that's the difference of a great weightlifter and a bad weightlifter, is how soon you get on your toes. So keeping their feet flat as long as you can. I think that's probably my golden go-to movement of teaching these exercises. So if you get them mobile, teach them some basic strength, you teach them the basic movements, and it's really not even the movements, it's kind of just the basic holding positions that they're going to have to go through. Then after that, you hope you've got decent athletes that you're working with. Then sometimes you just, you take the training wheels off and see what you've accomplished. And then from there, if you got to regress, then you regress. And don't be afraid to slow cook things, and don't be afraid to, for these two exercises, kind of accommodate and go at the rate kind of the slowest person. That is not a good recipe for long term, but in the early stages of teaching those exercises, I think that's really what you have to do. Because the minute you get away from proper technique on cleans and snatches, even by a little deviation, that is where you start to lose what you carry over to the field. And that's really where the technical component and the necessity for the technical component comes from.
I know that you've worked at a couple different institutions at the different levels, different sports, that type of thing. I want to talk about the high school athlete as they're preparing to go to play at the college level. And we can use football as a sport just so we have some type of similarities within the word choices or the tone of the conversation. And then also from the college to the CFL, NFL, pro level, or into the professional career. I mean, what are some common mistakes that the athletes are making when they're preparing to go to the next level? And then what other considerations should they be making to really to emphasize their academics and then their avenue of choice potentially?
The first thing is that actually what you finished with in your question is make academics a priority. Let's face it, not everyone likes school. Not everyone is going to be good at school. Make it a priority so your grades are good enough where it does not become the limiting factor in you getting into the college that you want to get into. You don't make it the limiting factor on whether or not you can go to OTAs at an NFL camp. So eliminate that, from the start. And I've worked with enough athletes in college where, let's face it, yes, school is important to us, but not everyone likes school, and you're not going to change them. So I think you're barking up the wrong tree when you start harping on academics. People, they don't want to buy into it as much as they should. But I think going back to, the beginning of your question, I think high school athletes who are going into college and college athletes who are going into the pros, they both share some common faults in putting themselves in the best position for that transition to that level. I think it's really easy for, in both scenarios, they forget where they came from. They forget what they had to go through to get them to that point. A book that I'm a big fan of is the Legacy book about the All Blacks, the rugby team from New Zealand. And, they have a saying that's called sweep the sheds. And for them, no matter if you're the captain of the team or the last player on the team, if your number is called, it's your turn to clean the shed. And for them, the shed is their locker room. So it doesn't matter how important you are. If your number is called, you're cleaning the locker room, and that's it's teaching them humility. So I look at aspects like that. Don't forget where you've come from. The other thing in a training environment, be influenced by what you need to continue your development. Don't be influenced by what others are currently doing. It's like when we are recruiting high school athletes. What's the first thing we want them to do? Well, we want them to start doing our training program. That's important because they need to get an idea of what they're going to be doing here. But at the same time, they might not be ready to handle that type of training. That's what our guys that are here are doing, or they start doing as freshmen. That might not be what that senior in high school needs. At the same time, and you hope this is the scenario that you get these freak athletes where that basic freshman workout is just that. It's way too basic for them. So they need to be influenced by what they need. Same thing with college players. This drives me crazy all the time. They put in their 3, 4, maybe even 5 years of work within your collegiate strength and conditioning program, and they make all this progress. And it translates in the field and puts them in a good position to be drafted. And then as soon as they start seeing what NFL players do, they're like, oh, well, that's what I can do. That's good enough for me. And playing basketball and riding the Pre-Corps for an hour might be what an NFL veteran can get by with, but it's not what you need going into your rookie year. So be influenced by what your training needs to be. In sticking with that from a training standpoint, and this is probably more so with college players going in professional, is don't lose your usable strength. And what I mean by usable strength is strength that you have acquired in the weight room, strength that you have acquired with the genetics that you have that have helped you get to this point. It drives me crazy that these guys do all this development work in college and they get to NFL, and next thing you know, they're doing Pilates for 30 minutes. And they start losing all their strengths. And then they start to wonder why their bodies are always breaking down. And I know every NFL player always says, well, that's how impactful, that's how vicious the league is. That's how painful the game is. I don't have any energy. I can't bother to lift any weights during the season. I'm like, but you have set the example of this vicious negative cycle. It's a negative loop that you go through. You're getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and all you're telling me is you're getting more hurt and more sore, and you can't recover. Well, you've lost your usable strength that you can actually use So I think those are some of the common mistakes that different athletes lose sight of, and they lose the concept of how important they are, whether it's going from high school to college or from college to professional.
When you're starting in this field, you're an intern, a volunteer. Hopefully you become a paid intern, you become a GA somewhere, you take a low assistant position, and you kind of walk yourself all the way up through the ranks. And I think sometimes we get prepared well for that process and that struggle, that journey. But I don't know if we ever get prepared for what happens when we become the lead dog, the director, the head strength coach position, and if we got to go to an assistant position or go into the private sector or make what some people would consider a lateral move at times. And the conversation, and I'll even talk to the listeners here, Bryan and I had a very open and candid conversation about the experiences both he and I had going from director or head strength conditioning positions and going a different route. Me going into the private sector and him going into an assistant role, and how we both benefited from it. A lot of people look at that as almost like a negative in their own mind, and both of us have discussed how it can enhance us as coaches and the impact that we can make on the lives of others. I mean, what advice would you have for those starting their own program and going up that ladder, if you want to call it that? And then also, Bryan, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about what it takes as far as the character and the internal drive to take that time to go from a director or head coaching position and going to an assistant or going into the private sector and some of the struggles and successes that are associated with that as well.
I was the director at Oregon State University for over 9 years, almost 10 years. I'll start by answering the one question you had about starting a program. And it's a great question for every strength coach, whether you're an assistant or a director, to at least think about, to write down, because eventually someone's going to ask you that. And it's a pretty common question during the interview process. So for me, starting a program is have a clear concept of what your vision is for that program and how that vision is intertwined within the athletic department, because ultimately we are just ambassadors to the athletic department. So after you have your vision, work on what your mission is. Okay, how are you going to go about fulfilling your vision? And have your guiding principles that can help you with that. To me, the way I look at it is a mission statement that defined me as this is our culture, this is our environment, and this is my brand. That's the way I looked at my mission statement. Other things to look at in starting a program, you have to know how to hire appropriately. Do you always want to hire your friends? Well, be careful with that. Some people can get away with that, other people can't. But hiring appropriately is something I thought I did a very good job with. And a lot of the people who I hired when I was at Oregon State, only one of them did I ever have to do a on-campus interview with. All the other people, I felt comfortable, thorough, confident. I was at peace with just going through different phone interviews, going through that process, checking references, checking backgrounds, having open conversations, where I didn't need to have an on-campus interview. I knew exactly who I wanted to hire. So that's what I mean, hire appropriately. Guiding words of wisdom, always want to mitigate risks and plan for contingencies, because that is exactly what you have to do on a daily basis. You have to wear multiple hats. Unfortunately, most of the time you're wearing a fireman hat because you're putting fires out all day long. That's just something you need to be aware of. And then as far as, when you're starting a program, you have multiple coaches, multiple athletes that ultimately you work. You want to say you work with them, but ultimately you're working for them. But under promise what you're going to deliver, and then at the end of the day, be able to over deliver what you're giving back to that program. So that's some words of wisdom as far as starting a program. To the second question you had about changes within your career and uphill hills and obstacles that you have within the profession, I was a director for over 9 years, and now in my new role, I'm an assistant with football at the United States Naval Academy. So, like you said, some would look at it as it's a step down. Maybe in a hierarchy, it is looked at that way. But to me, every day, regardless of where you're at, you have responsibilities, whether they're given to you or they're responsibilities that you've taken upon yourself. Treat those responsibilities, no matter where you're at in your career, like you are a head coach. Always treat those responsibilities. No matter, okay, well, I need to put some, shakes in the fridge. Okay, well, you're the head coach and putting shakes in the fridge. If you treat all of your responsibilities like that, I think you never really lose sight of what your title is. But ultimately, that's all it is. It's a title, and it helps with that quarter inch on the resume. That's really about it. But it is a humbling experience that you have to go through. And luckily, I have good friends within the profession that were very, very helpful in going through that. But at the same time, going through that process, you also find out who you thought your friends were, and some of them really are not as good of friends as you ultimately thought. And scenarios with that where you call somebody as a friend of yours and like, hey, I hear there's this job over here. Do you know anybody there? Have any connections? What's the deal? What are they looking for? And they give you some very vague answer, and as soon as they hang up the phone, they're the one calling that school for themselves. So you've just tipped off someone about a job that you need for someone who you thought was your friend, and they already have a job. So that's kind of it's a real shot to your heart, because these are, if you're not working with emotions in this profession, then you're really not contributing to the athletes that you have. So that's a very tough experience to go through. But it's not the end of the world. Like you said, there are definitely bonuses to going through it. And the way I look at it was, I got to spend a heck of a lot more time with my family, which, that's really, the only boss that I really have that matters is my wife and my kids. Those are the ones that matter. We treat our profession as our livelihood, but they're not our lives. We have much more important titles in our life than whether you're a director or an assistant, and that's, father, dad, husband, brother, sister, whatever it may be. So, it is very humbling, but, I'm using this as a big advantage because my stress levels are going down. Some of my gray hairs are going away. I'm actually sleeping, and I wish I could say I'm sleeping more, but, just sleeping and sleeping itself is a step in the right direction. And this, networking and learning, which I thought I did a decent job of when I was at Oregon State, but, what I have read now, I probably could not read in 5 years as being a director. The people who I've contacted and networked with, in my 5 or 6 months here at Navy, I could not have done in 5 to 10 years at Oregon State. So you really get to reinvent, your education. You get to reinvent your background, and specifically speaking, what I've learned here at Navy is the qualities of leadership. And that's something that, when you're a director, you sometimes don't get exposed to that enough, because you get almost overwhelmed by some of your daily responsibilities, and you forget that you have to lead all these different people. And you don't get in. I'll be honest. You get exposed to different administrators at different universities who are not the greatest leaders. So my experience here at Navy, it's only exponentially improving my capabilities down the road, when I choose to be a director again.
Bryan, man, I'm pounding away here with my laptop taking notes as we're talking this through. And again, when we talked the other day, you saw me with a notepad and a pen there, just rattling away, just asking questions and then doing the best I could to listen, and hopefully helping to have an honest exchange back and forth, and hopefully it was worthwhile to you as well. But if anybody's listening to this conversation and they wanted to get in touch with you, maybe as a mentor or just talk shop about the field as a whole, whether it's from the professional networking side or program design, working with kids from the high school going to college or in the college sector, et cetera, how can they go about reaching out to you and finding out more information about what you have going on?
The best way is by email. My email address here at the Naval Academy is bmiller@usna.edu. Being at a military institution, if you're sending me random emails, we have a big security process that emails go through, so I don't get all my emails. But whatever emails I get, I try to reply back to as soon as I can. One thing, again, this is off topic, but kind of on topic. The people who I've ever interviewed in the past, and I was always one of those guys that said, yep, I'll keep your resume. Stay in contact with those people that you interview. Sometimes, my best friends right now in the profession are people who I ultimately didn't hire for a position, but I interviewed, I thought very highly of, and I've used them not only to become friends, but also as professional development, assets. So if you reach out to me, I'm going to reach out to you for sure.
Again, Coach Miller, man, I appreciate the opportunity to meet you the other day. It's obviously a privilege to have you on the show here, my man. Again, appreciate you sharing some knowledge with me and the listeners. Hopefully this is a launching pad for us to do many more things down the road now that you're on the East Coast, and I'm looking forward to getting a chance to learn more about you, my man.
Rob, this has been a great opportunity for me. Truth be told, this is my first podcast interview, if you will. I do a lot of public speaking, but this is the first one over social media. So my hats are off to you, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I look forward to contributing to this profession going forward.